Hello class. Today I wanted to start showing you how to make an animal out of clay. And I'm going to try to show you like a few different ways to do this, and there will be a link in the PowerPoint for every single video for you to figure out which one will be best for you. But this animal I'm going to make is going to be with 4 legs, and so yeah, I'm going to start with white clay because we are going to be painting this with underglaze, which you'll see in a later video. But I wanted to use the white clay because then I don't have to put down a white slip before I start painting it. It'll just be white, but I know it looks gray. It's not really going to look gray. When it gets fired, it'll actually be white like this. So just trust that it will, the impurities will burn out and it will turn white later. So I'm starting with a hunk of clay that is about 5 inches long and about 2 inches thick. So this will make me a pretty decent sized animal, but I can't just work with the clay solid like this because it won't ever dry and it will blow up in the kiln. So I need to hollow it out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I think I'm going to make a cat or maybe a bulldog of some kind. We'll see. But I'm going to start out by shaping and pinching up a head. You can see that doesn't look like a head yet, but that's just the rough shape of it. I don't want to get too many details yet, just starting. And then I'm also going to pinch out where the tail would be. Now if it's a bulldog, it'd be a tiny tail, but if I decide to make this into a cat, I'm going to need a little bit more clay, so I'm going to keep some clay back there. Then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to make sure it's even on both sides. And I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to pinch towards the head, what will be the head eventually. And that's just giving myself some clay for the legs. And I'm going to do the same, kind of pinching from the sides and towards the back. And that is kind of making me have like a little bit of clay for some legs eventually. Not yet. Don't start making the legs too early. And I'm even going to steal a little bit more on the front. Looks a little bit skinny. And I want it to be pretty even. The reason I'm not adding the legs on is that every time you add something on, that can be a place where it falls back off. And you don't want that. So if this area is just not big enough, I could add a little in. I just don't want to. I'd rather take some off from the other side than add on, personally. You can add it on. I just think it's can cause some weak areas. I suppose I should just show that though. So I'm just going to add in a little coil here and smooth that on. Now, this is still a solid inch thick or more, and here same. So I need to hollow this out. This is really important. If you sculpt an animal and it is not hollowed out, we will not fire it. We'll be able to pick it up and know that it's solid. So you have to make sure you hollow it out. What I'm going to do is go in through the stomach area. I'm making a hole just like we did when we make pinch mugs and bowls. And I'm going to pinch towards the head. And I'll show that. I'm going to pinch it till it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. And you can see I'm doing that right now. Now I'm going to go into the butt, back end, and I'm going to do the same. I'm leaving the legs just structurally the way they are because I'll be working on those in a little bit. And now for the head, I actually need to go in through the front or top, and I'm going to hollow that out so that I'm going through to the cavity of the body. And then I'm going to pinch that as well. And I'm going to close it back up. So another question a lot of students ask me when we're in the classroom is like, how do I close that up? And it really is just a matter of moving clay most of the time. So in this case, I'm just closing that back up, and that's going to trap that air. And then where this body cavity is still open, I need to make like a little pancake to shut that off. I want to make sure this is really thinned out enough before I do that, because there's no going back after this unless I reopen it. So I'm going to take a little bit of clay. And again, this is the white clay, which looks kind of gray, but it will turn white eventually. And I'm making a patty that's, you know, around the thickness of the clay. And I am going to connect that on. And I'm just gonna get in there with mostly my fingers, but you can also use your rib in this part, and that might really help compress it as well. All right, so I know right now it doesn't look like much of an animal, just like this silhouette of a potato animal blob, really, is what it looks like. But now I'm going to shape the face. Now I'm kind of resigned myself to the idea that this might be a bulldog. So I'm gonna have not a bulldog, but a Boston Terrier, which is kind of similar. And I'm going to start pinching the face. So I'm not adding really anything on, I'm moving the clay. And I don't use a lot of water. I'm kind of noticing in some of your in progress videos or photos that you post that some of the pots have looked extremely saturated. And I want you to know that it doesn't have to be like that. So now you can see I'm kind of getting the shape of the bulldog nose. And I'm making something I know quite a bit about, since I spend a lot of time with my dog, especially these days. But if you can have a picture nearby to look at, that does really help if you don't have an animal. And I'm going to make, put in like a little eye on each side. I got it wet first. And I'm adding in the classic little eyes, which are, for my dog, seem to look in two different directions at the same time. And I'm just using my fingers. You may notice I haven't gotten really out any tools. I'm just pushing and pulling and modeling using my fingers. Now, I don't really feel like there's that much clay for me to move to create the ears. I'm kind of trying to squeeze it and give him just a little bit of a neck. He doesn't have much of a neck, but a little. I'm going to try to give him. And I'm going to add the ears on. So again, I'm going to get that a little bit wet first, make a little slip on the surface. And I'm going to start with, he's got really big ears, my dog. I'm going to start with the rounded side when I attach it to make sure I don't trap air on each side. And then I'm going to make sure I connect those really good. Kind of working backwards. I can't really see what I'm doing, but we'll get around to shape these in a second. So really just started with some balls, and I'm gonna shape these ears. I gotta kind of flip it so I can look. Oh, not great, but not terrible. And I can move that clay because there seems to be like a real space between his ears. And I have to work back into those eyes just a little bit. Make sure there's an upper and lower lid so it doesn't look like a zombie. And this has got just maybe a little bit too much clay on this ear, so I chopped a little off. There we go. All right. A little bit more. All right, now, this is a good start. I'm going to go in and I'm going to, I think this is a little thick in the middle, and I don't want to cut through what I just added. I did cut through just a little bit, so let's add that back in. I guess I should have just left it. So one thing I forgot to talk about was how the air maintains that shape on the inside. So I can do all these things, move the clay and pinch it and do all these things, and it really holds its shape pretty well, and that's because the air is inside of it. And that air is a really important, asset to me right now, but it's not going to stay an asset. I do eventually have to poke a hole into this sculpture when it hits about leather hard, or it will explode. All right, now for the legs. I suppose I could, in theory, leave it like, as a beefy, weird little legs. But what I'd like to do is slice it up the middle on both. And then I'm going to kind of get my hands just a little damp or wet, and I'm going to pull out the feet. So it's kind of like pulling a handle like you saw in the cup video. There, that looks real bully. And I'm just making the legs, I want to make them so that they can support the figure, you know. I don't want to make them frail or thin. And if one is longer than the other, you probably will have to take a little bit off. So just kind of know that. And I want to bring those down, and I want them separate. If they're too close together, it's just going to fall over. Then I'm going to come over here in the back and do the same. And I'm just kind of roughing this out now, but eventually I'll be able to go back in and work on more details once it sets up. I always think that tripods work great for sculpture, and maybe at some point I'll do another video for that. But right now I want to say that Ford can make things a little uneven, and so you have to be really careful. You could make like a little slab that you attach your animal to, and that would make it a little bit stronger. Okay, this is coming along pretty well. This is the front, this is the back. The tail's really ridiculously large, so I just pulled off a bunch of clay because my dog Murph has a tiny little comma tail. I'm not adding in all of his boy bits. I'm going to leave that to the imagination maybe. And I could work into his little feet. This one's still a little long. And I'm going to make little paw things. Once this sets up to leather hard, I'm not going to do much with it now. I'm not going to leave it on its legs. It won't be able to support that massive body. But remember, when it hits leather hard, that's the strongest it's going to be. And I can leave this now on its side somewhere and let it set up, and I will be able to eventually, once it sets up, be able to lift it back up, and it will be able to support its own weight. But right now, it's not going to do that. Don't try it. The legs will buckle. But when it's getting closer to leather hard, you'll be able to pick it up. Don't let it dry completely, but let it dry a bit, and you'll be able to flip it up, and it will be able to hold its form really, really well. All right. Thank you.